Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome you back. So I hope you remember that what exactly we had been discussing in the last class. So in the last class we had been talking about basically the ancient India, right? And I think you have joined the last session. I believe that you must have joined the last session and you must be remembering that what is the objective of this particular session, right? So as I did tell you that in this particular boot camp, we have been precisely trying to discuss about the new approach that you should follow while preparing for history optional, and how we have done it. We have divided it into a couple of sessions, right? So ancient, medieval, modern world, and the map section. So in the last session, we had been discussing mainly about one portion, that was ancient India. And I hope the way I have given this title, that how the concepts were pretty much required or it's needed in order to cope up with the areas of or the section of ancient India. This is what I had been discussing. So now in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about basically the other area. This is what we are going to pick, and that is the medieval India, right? So the way we had been emphasizing on emphasizing on emphasizing on concepts or building concepts in ancient India in order to perform pretty well. In the same way, in today's session, this is the day 2. Now I have titled it from core to periphery, medieval India. This is what I have I have written. So if I have been saying there is a reason behind, if this is the title, that from core to periphery, in that case there is a meaning. So every session has been titled as per as per, I can say, the need or the requirement or the demand of the UPSC examination. So this is how we are going to deal with this, right? Or that would be in the center. So basically in today's session we'll be emphasizing completely on medieval India, and while discussing about that, we'll just try to understand that how to somehow how to cover the syllabus in medieval India in such a way that you are well prepared to answer the questions coming from the medieval India, and you are feeling that comfort, that ease while answering the questions in the medieval Indian segment, right? So the way we had been doing in the last session, the same in the same way, I'll be discussing everything with respect to the syllabus, and then we'll be trying to somehow understand that what are the what are the basically what is the best method to understand medieval India, to prepare the content which is somehow needed to you, and then what are the areas where you should focus upon, and then what are the sources which might be the best sources to cover the medieval India, that you can ultimately get certain concrete ideas for this medieval India, right? So when it comes to medieval India, right, what is the period which is called as medieval India? Let us start from there only, that what this particular period is called as medieval India. And probably if you have followed the last lecture properly, in that case you must be realizing one fact, that the real definition of medieval India is itself a bit doubtful. Why? Because in case of world history or in case of European history, normally what happens, the period which is falling between the period which starts after the coming of feudalism, that is somewhere around 6th century or 5th century, and here from here till 16th century, that is the period which is considered as medieval. And why this particular period has been considered as medieval? There is a very simple reason behind that, because after the coming of feudalism, it was believed that since there was a structural change, there was a change that could be noticed in polity, economy, society, religion, and everything, and that's how it was a beginning of new era. Now this particular division has been precisely done in order to get a sort of convenience to study. Normally when you want to you study history, you have to divide the time in order to have a better understanding, because if you have been reading the whole history in one go, then it is a bit difficult. And that's how if you have been dividing them, or if you have been doing the periodization, so that periodization somehow helps you to have a better understanding, and that's how this ancient, medieval, and modern division had been done. So basically when it comes to the European history, so in context of European history, I did tell you that feudalism was considered to be the dividing line between ancient and medieval, and then it was believed that there was a very different kind of political, social, economic, and no, religious structure coming into Europe. And that's the reason, because of what, it to Indian history. Now whether we can apply this idea or not, that remains the question. In the last class also, when I had been dealing with the when I had been dealing with this the post Harsa period or the post Gupta period, so I did tell you that there is bit confusion about this period, that whether the period between 7th century to 12th century, should it be kept in the category of medieval or in the category of ancient? Because if you follow the early Marxist scholars, in that case, you all will be able to realize that they were quite clear that there was one institution which is coming into existence was feudalism, and since India has entered into feudalism, and that's how it is the beginning of medieval era. But do you know one thing? When it comes to the Marxist scholars, there is a problem with the Marxist scholars, that Marxist scholars have been always trying to imitate the European history. The way Europe was moving, even the Marxist scholars tried to somehow show that India had been also moving into the same direction, and that's how they were quite desperate to prove that feudalism was there even in India. And after the coming of this feudalism, India also entered into medievalism. But look, ultimately every region is very different. The you know the development and the growth of every region remains very different, and that is how, whether it is correct to say that the feudalism was there in India or not, that became subjective specifically after 1980s, 1980s and 1990s. So when it comes to DD Kosambi, RS Sharma, DN Jha, all these people were those who were quite desperate to prove the feudalism, which was countered by the people like VD Chattopadhyay, then Harman Kulke, then Harbans Mukhya is the most prominent one. I should have taken the name of Harbans Mukhya first. So these are those people who question, and they ask you whether it was literally feudalism or not. So since it became a sort of debatable topic in Indian history, and that's how the early medieval period somehow became a bit conflicting one. Now the historians are debating on this point whether this early medieval period, the 7th century, from 7th century to 12th century, should it be kept in the ancient or should it be kept in the medieval? Because if you believe there was no feudalism, or there was something which was not somehow creating that divide line or that midline, in that case we should consider it as the continuity of ancient India, right? So if you consider it as continuity of ancient India, in that case, what is true then? In that case, we should be part, we should consider it as part of ancient India. But then those who are yet believing in the concept of feudalism, they are yet saying the medieval era started from here, and this is the reason because of what this period has become very dicey. Now, what exactly we should treat or we should react? I think there is no firm answer. That's the reason because of what I did tell you, that when you have been writing UPSC examination or preparing history optional, frankly speaking, you should be ready for the questions in both the segments, ancient and medieval, but in part A and part B also. And that's how I think you'll be able to somehow respond better in the paper. So that's why just be mentally just mentally be ready that questions may be asked, though I have realized that gradually the questions are more appearing in the ancient side, and then it is reducing day by day in the medieval side. So yet there are certain topics which are being asked in the in the medieval segment. And what are those topics? Such as feudalism debate is one topic which is there. Then it is considered to be the Chola state, or the various dimensions of the Chola state, then Agraharas. So there are few topics which are yet being asked in the medieval, but then there's nothing as such that you need to prepare separately. Ultimately, you have been reading early medieval, right? You have to study early medieval. And the way I did tell you that when it comes to early medieval, now you have to focus more on early medieval, because gradually that number of questions are increasing on early medieval. And in fact, there are cultural aspects, there are social aspects, there are economic aspects, there are political dimensions, right? There's an architectural aspect. So since early medieval is so rich in so rich in basically the various developments, as I told you that in different domains you find these developments, that's how undoubtedly this period remains very important. तो वो आपको cover ऐसे भी करना है, तो मुझे लगता है कि फर्क नहीं पड़ता है कि whether it is being asked in ancient or it is being asked in medieval. Problem which is there, right? The kind of problem which is there in the beginning point, in the similar fashion you can find the problem even in the end point also. How come the end point? Now it is believed that when it comes to when it comes to fine. So I was just discussing when it comes to the medieval India, if you go for the starting point of medieval India, starting point, in that case it remains controversial, not controversial, rather it's best, it's best to say it is debatable. Why? Because the period between 7th century to 12th century, 12th century, it is a very dicey period. In the same way, when it comes to the end point Again, I'll say that it is slightly debatable. Not like this, but it is there. Normally, we believe the medieval is ending with the coming of with the coming of with the death of Aurangzeb. When you see the death of Aurangzeb, what happened? It is believed that medieval ended. But then, do you really find it practical that with the death of one person, it is any particular period is ending? I think it's highly impractical to say. When you say that there is a beginning of a new era or new period, it is based on certain features. If the society, polity, economy, are having certain features, in that case, we say it is the beginning of a new period. So once, it is ending, or you are moving towards a new period, let's say modernity for that matter. So undoubtedly, there should be certain features, right? That only after the transformations in those features, you can say that now you have entered into a new period. So as per that, 18th century is considered to be the period in which you can secure this particular transitions from ancient, from medieval to modern. And that's how this particular period again remained highly controversial, because from this particular period, you do not find the questions only from the medieval segment, but you even find the questions in the modern segments also, right? And the way you have seen the increasing number of questions, right? The increasing number of questions in the medieval side, and that's how now certain topics from this part has to be prepared by keeping in mind that this you have been covering in medieval. And it is very important, when you have been studying the modern, the nature of the questions are very different. When you have been studying the medieval, the nature of questions are very different, because everything has been ultimately confined within the boundaries of medievalism. When you study the modern, the things are being confined in the boundaries of basically modern. That's the reason, because of what you have to keep in mind, that 18th century is important even with respect to medieval India, and that's how you should try to prepare 18th century from the medieval perspective also, correct? So that's how there are certain controversial things which are there from ancient and medieval both, from the beginning and the end point both. And that's why by keeping in mind, you confine your boundaries and just be ready for that. Fine. Now this is the thing that you had I was willing to discuss. And now let's come to the main point. So as I told you, or as I did in the last class, that we have tried to cover everything with respect to the syllabus. Now also we just try to we'll try to cover the things as per the syllabus. Let's see. Now if we'll go to the syllabus, now this is the first two, these are the first two topics. And these first two topics are primarily dealing with which part? It is the early medieval India. So as you can see that in this particular part, this is, sorry. Okay. This is early medieval India, 750 to 1200, and this is also early medieval India. But then here you are basically supposed to cover basically the political and I can say polity plus economy, correct? On the other hand, if you go to this part, they have categorically written it. This is the cultural transition. So it is, since it is the cultural transition, so mainly the cultural parts are there. Okay, cultural topics are there. Now, if you see the political history of this part, in that case, you may find that there was one very important kingdom is there, that's called as Cholas. And mind you, Cholas have always been very significant topic in Indian history. And in fact, even for UPSC also, it has been very important. Now, Cholas are important for multiple reasons, because it is considered to be the first empire. But then do you really believe that this is the only significance of the Cholas, that it used to be the first empire? No, definitely not. The Cholas are known for their multiple contributions, and frankly speaking, they had political contribution, they had social contribution, they had economic contribution, they had cultural contribution as well. And now that makes the difference, because earlier when it comes to the Chola kingdom, frankly speaking, most of the time you might have seen the questions on the Chola kingdom with respect to their village local self government, and it was such an important topic. It was almost all after 1 or 2 years gap. It had to be repeated necessarily, right? मतलब वो एक तरीके से हमारे लिए जब when we used to write the UPSC examination, frankly speaking, we are pretty sure कि for last 2 years this question hasn't come, so this year is definitely going to come. That kind of belief used to be there, right? So basically, this was one question which had been repeated. But then, as I did tell you, that when it comes to the Chola state, frankly speaking, the Chola state cannot be covered in this way. The Chola state is having multiple significance and importance, and that's the reason because of what, when it comes to covering the Chola state, you have to know about multiple dimensions, such as what are the dimensions that should be discussed when you are when you are discussing about, or when you are trying to cover the Chola state, right? So, frankly speaking, when you have been talking about the Chola state, so apart from the polity, and frankly speaking, I do not find something very important in polity. Administration may be important, and in administration, basically that local self-government is very important. But then apart from this, their source, sorry, first of all, we should try to cover the economy. Now they had multiple contributions towards the economy. When it comes to the Chola state, now this is considered to be one of the best period for the trade and commerce, and the way the Chola state was expanding itself outside, the way they are going to Sri Lanka, the way they were going to the Southeast Asian countries, and the way they have been developing their trade relationship with so many countries, and that's how they had larger contributions. Now, as a result of that, not only there were certain external changes, but also there were certain internal changes, and these changes were becoming very important. Now, what kind of internal and external changes I have been talking about? When it comes to the external changes, I am basically willing to say that the way these people were going for some political expeditions outside, what sort of trade relationship they had established, what was the contribution what the Southeast East Indian states were having, like what sort of relationship was there with China. So there is a possibility of so many questions. So that is, these are certain external things. Now, what are the internal things? Because of this lavish, or this this glorious, the lavish and this glorious, I mean to say, trade relationship. Ultimately, certain inner structural changes could be also precisely noticed in India. Now, what changes were there? Such as, you can talk about the formation of this money gramam, right? So basically, these were those artisanal settlements, and these artisanal settlements and the creation of guilds, right? So these are certain inner changes. Frankly speaking, yet UPSC hasn't hunted these areas, but the kind of research work which have happened in last few years, frankly speaking, there is possibility from, great possibility from the questions from the economy. Fine. Now, when it comes to the other dimension, right, so we can say society. Now, undoubtedly, it is redefining the South Indian society, and since it is redefining the South Indian society, that's the reason because of what I can say, that here society is also very important. And then finally, I'll say that it is the cultural dimension. So what I'm simply trying to say you, that there are a great number of possibility of questions from the Chola. Unfortunately, there are very few dimensions or very minor dimensions have been asked so far, and that's why you have to be ready for the new dimensions. And that's why don't read the Cholas from the notes, or on the basis of the PYQs, that okay, I have covered these many dimensions, my job is done. No, it is not incorrect. That's why you need to be quite careful in the Chola state. Fine. So this is one dimension which is there. And then apart from that, apart from that, there is another term, that is Indian feudalism. So Indian feudalism, I have emphasized a lot on Indian feudalism. So you must be understanding that this debate is yet on, and that's why at any point of time you can expect the question. So Indian feudalism, you need to prepare well, okay? And then when it comes to the rest of the areas, now they are not very different, right? But they are not very different. You have studied earlier also, so I think there's nothing new that you need to do. They must be studied by you. Okay, there is one topic, that is condition of women. Now, women is always very important in UPSC syllabus. So, wherever in your syllabus, within a particular topic, if this topic has this particular terminology has been given to you, in that case, it means it is important. And then it is science and technology. These kind of things we have discussed in the last class. Now, this is one area which has become recently very important, and I believe that almost every year they have been asking questions from this part, right? It has become a sort of very what to say? It has become a sort of very common phenomena that they have been asking the questions. And in fact, if time permits, in that case, I'll show you the question also. So when it comes to the cultural traditions, so either it is about the philosophy, Sankaracharya, the Vedantic philosophy, and the other philosophies, or else let's say you talk about the development in the religion. Because these days they have asked good number of questions on religion also, so that is becoming very important. Literature is equally very important, and undoubtedly art and architecture is also very important. And frankly speaking, in last few years, the emphasis has increased a lot in these kind of topics, and that is why these topics are yet very important. and you should prepare well, but then you have to identify that what are the maximum possibilities of the areas, or the topics which may be asked, and as per that only you need to prepare. So these are couple of things that you have to keep in mind for this side. Let's move to the to new topics. Now, frankly speaking, or if I'll go for a simplistic interpretation of this, I'll simply say this is nothing but the Delhi Sultanate, right? And it is I can say that this is nothing but the political history. This is nothing, but it is the political history of Sultanate period, right? It is nothing but the political history of Delhi Sultanate. Now, there is a twist here. Earlier, when we talked about medieval, frankly speaking, we talked about only few states. The most important topics were Delhi Sultanate, the Mughals, max to max Vijayanagara and Bahmani. Now, when you try to understand the medieval syllabus, these remain the most important topics. Frankly speaking, now, unfortunately, they do not remain that much important. And in fact, I'll say that the number of questions are getting lesser and lesser every year, right? So there is a sort of drastic decline, and I think it's better to see it's better to see the questions also simultaneously that can help you to understand it a better way, right? So okay, medieval India. So look, if you'll see the questions, in that case, this is the early medieval India, right? This is the first topic. And just look at the question, Chola maritime expansion, right? There was a question asked on Chola maritime expansion. The Chola rulers were not only mighty conquerors, efficient administrators, but also builders of fine temples, right? Now, this is the cultural dimension which has been asked on the Cholas. Okay, fine. Next, the various proponents of Indian feudalism, I told you that this remains important. They have asked the question on Brahmadeyas also, these are certain things. Moving to the next part. Now, as I told you that this is one part which is becoming more and more relevant these days. And 2019, they asked a question on Sankaracharya, then Veera Saiva movement. Then you can find the Al-Biruni's assessment, last to last year they asked this question. So here also, you can see the increasing number of questions are there. And then it comes to the 13th century. Fine. Now, in 13th century, exactly I was telling that the number and nature of questions both are changing, right? So you can see that if it is about the establishment of Delhi Sultanate, then 2019, 2020, and after that there was no question has been asked since then. So for last 4 years there was not a single question has been asked on this particular topic. So yeah. When it comes to the Iltutmish and Balban, 2022, and then 2023. So look, this is one unit. So undoubtedly you can expect at least one question necessarily from this topic. एक तो पक्का आएगा, लेकिन it is not necessary that they have been asking more number of questions. Earlier, what happened, as far as this particular unit is concerned, good number of questions was being asked from this particular unit only. So this trend has changed. Now, the minimum quorum they need to fulfill. It is not compulsory for them also that they are asking it from this unit. They may avoid it. But as I did tell you that the moment you talk about the medieval India, frankly speaking, in medieval India, Sultanate and Mughals they used to be the core topic, and that's how it is almost impossible. But the way I did tell you that they have reduced the number of questions, that's one thing. And the second thing that you have to keep in mind that now they have started asking the less popular topics from less popular topic from these areas, such as earlier what kind of questions were coming when it comes to 13th century. So mainly the questions were related to the foundation of Delhi Sultanate, and they had been asking about the role played by Iltutmish and Balban. That's it. Majorly the questions were based on them. Now they're not simply asking the question in this way, rather they have been doing some sort of some sort of experiments with this. Okay, different kind of questions are being framed from this part. So that's how here while covering this Delhi Sultanate, you have to be bit what to say, bit innovative. थोड़ी बहुत आपको इंक्विजिव नेचर रखनी पड़ेगी जिससे आप लोग कुछ नए डायमेंशन सोच सके, या फिर थोड़े जो critical aspects है. The only point I would suggest you here that in these topics you need to follow a bit critical approach, that you are not simply covering that whatsoever has happened, rather, or you are not covering the things as per certain topics. sorry, as per certain points. Okay, if this is the question, like these are the points I'm going to write. So you have to be ready conceptually if like the new dimensions are being asked, at least you are having some content to write about it. That's the most important thing. So this is like the suggestion that I'll be giving you. Okay, then moving to the next one, like that is the 14th century. And in 14th century, as you all know, that there were two popular like dynasties, and these were the Khalji dynasty and the Tughlaq dynasty. Now, when it comes to the Khalji and Tughlaq dynasty, again I'll say that these topics used to be very important at one point of time. Why? Because Khaljis, Alauddin Khilji, Ghayasuddin, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and then it comes to Firuz Shah Tughlaq. There were three very prominent rulers were there in this particular century, and that's how it is important. But then the same thing what I did tell you, that the way they have been like reducing the number of questions from 13th century, in the same way now they have been reducing the number of questions from 14th century also. And that's the reason, because of what, here again you have to be like prepare for the like first of all lesser number of questions, and the second thing, again they are trying to become more and more critical like in this particular part, such as like let's see some examples. Through some examples I can make you understand, like Khalji revolution. Now this is one topic. Last it was asked in 2006, and they have repeated this particular question. So all those topics, either they were important at one point of time, ठीक है, 1000 साल पहले important था, उसकी वापस importance बढ़ रही है, या फिर दूसरे तरीके के questions जहां पे they are not asking you simply to describe anything, rather they have been asking you to become more and more critical, such as the motive of Alauddin Khilji's agrarian policy was to curb the powers of intermediaries, examine the measure which he adopted to achieve his objective. Now, this is basically based on one dimension of it. So you have to be a bit critical in these kind of topics. You can't prepare कि okay, Alauddin Khilji's market policy. So this is market number 1, market number 2, market number 3. This like bureaucracy was appointed. You can't prepare in this way. You know the way I have been telling you is, since it is becoming bit on innovative, so you also need to prepare the topics bit conceptually, right, rather than like very much factually. Okay, fine. Muhammad bin Tughlaq, it's such an important topic, but the last question they asked in 2018, for last 7 years, 6 years, they haven't asked a single question from this Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Last year, I guess, believe that there was one question from Firuz Shah Tughlaq. That's it, right? Okay, now the next topic is society, culture, and economy in 13th and in 13th and 14th century. Frankly speaking, if it comes to this particular topic, now there is greater possibility of the question from these kind of topics, which are basically dealing with the society, culture, and economy in 13th century, 13th and 14th century. And here there are greater possibilities of question, and in fact not only possibilities of the questions, I can say diverse kind of questions can be asked, because when it comes to the society, or let's say even economy, so there are great number of possibilities. They, a minor dimension can be asked to you, like some very isolated dimensions can be asked to you, some peripheral dimensions can be asked to you. So this is the reason, because of what, like you should see the every word that had been given here in the syllabus, like quite precisely, and you should try to have the information on all of them. You should try that you are having information on all of them, such as if you'll see this particular topic like society, culture, and economy, fine, in 13th and 14th century. Now, here you see that what are the words they have used. The composition of rural society. Now, a simple question can be framed. What was the condition of rural society during the Sultanate period or during 13th and 14th century? Then it is ruling class. It is easy to write the answer. But frankly speaking, when it comes to the rural society, it is very tough to write answers on these kind of things. Why? Because most of the materials that you have been reading, unfortunately, the answer, the content which is there, they're not very substantive. They are very, what to say, very, very brief information. There. Okay, fine. So, since it is given in the syllabus, so you have to prepare it. Ruling class, it is okay. Town dwellers, now it is given in the syllabus. Now you just imagine, if you haven't studied, in that case you won't be able to answer. But अगर आपको लगता है कि आपने, guys, there is some technical issue, right? Unfortunately, it's going on. Let's try to continue it. If it is creating for frequent problems, in that case we have to think for something else. Now it's working fine, so let's continue it. Okay, fine. So yeah, I was just discussing town dwellers. Now, if you have studied, I was just asking this question: if you have studied, the Sultanate period, do you have the solid content to write the answer of these questions? No, but the questions are coming. Women, like last year only they asked the question. The religious classes, the caste, slavery, sultanate, the caste, slavery under the sultanate, and then Bhakti movement and the Sufi movement. Now, within this particular topic, there are n number of possibilities of questions. You just think honestly that how many of you are having substantial content on this particular question. Though I must tell you that the number of questions are increasing from these areas, and that's how you should prepare it pretty well. Look at this. Next topic. It is known as culture. The first is the Persian literature, like literature in the regional languages of North India, literature in South India, the Sultanate architecture, and the new structural forms, painting evolution of a composite culture. More or less, I can say one thing: they have written everything, right? सब उसने लिख दिया. But then these are certain things. The moment it comes to the society, there are only 2 or 3 dimensions are being covered by the students, and they leave it. कि ठीक है यार, society में इससे ज़्यादा क्या पूछेंगे? But I think this is not the reality. There are possibilities that they may ask so many things because they have given it in the syllabus. In the same way, in economy, agricultural production, rise of urban economy, non-agricultural production, trade and commerce, like I can say this is as compared to the last one, this is even simple. But then find the possibilities of the questions in these areas, and this is what happening. In the present time, the number of questions are day by day increasing from that unit 5, and in fact, multiple dimensions are being asked from this part. I think I would like to give you some certain examples in order to make you understand. Let's see. This is the question, right? This is the topic. Now, society. So they have asked the Muslim nobility under the period of Tughlaq dynasty. Okay, fine. This is society, culture, and economy. Okay, go to other areas. Economy. Now, 2020, 2 questions have been asked. 2022, one question has been asked. So, and it is about the urban settlement, which was not really being asked earlier. Persian literature. 21, 23, the questions were there from the Persian literature. So you can find that now they have started hunting the questions from these areas, and that's how I must say as far as your syllabus is concerned, this is one unit that should be prepared pretty well by you, and this is the reason because of what I have told you, that now this is a sort of shift towards what it is, a shift towards the periphery, the periphery, I must say. Okay, fine. Now after this, okay, the next unit is the 15th and early 16th century, the political development. Frankly speaking, it is more about the regional kingdoms, right? Now, these regional kingdoms have become very important these days, and in last few years only, I have noticed the questions on basically Jainul Abidin. I have noticed the question on Malwa, then Bahmani, Vijayanagar, right? They have asked the question on Lodhis also. So they have asked the questions on the Portuguese colonial enterprises. Exactly the same question has been asked last year only. So look, this is one topic which was mostly ignored by the people, and as I had been discussing a few minutes back only, that Vijayanagar was the only topic which was considered to be important, and rest of all were normally being ignored. The only topic which was prepared by the people was the Sur Empire, and frankly, that number is not being asked from this part. Rather, the UPSC has changed the nature of the questions. We can understand this with respect to again, I can say the questions. Let's see the questions. Okay, sorry, fine. Okay, uh, that is this question. So look, 2019 there was a question on Jainul Abidin, and 16 also there was a question on Jainul Abidin. They have asked a question on medieval Deccan village, and look at the question: describe the village polity and the economy in medieval Deccan. So they were asking these kind of minor questions also. Describe village polity and the economy in medieval Deccan. And it is not South India. If it was South India, in that case, at least you would be having some idea. But then it is a question based on Deccan. The prolonged conflict between Vijayanagara and Bahmani. Amukta Mallada in 2020 there was a question. And this question was again very complicated. Amukta Mallada dwells much upon the relationship of fort, Brahmins and dispersed tribal groups. So details about the foreign travelers, in the Vijayanagar kingdom, Lodhis, they have asked the questions, so that's the reason because of what I can say. Ki number of questions from this particular unit is gradually increasing, and that clearly shows that those topics which were never being so important earlier, now the number of questions are increasing from these topics. Okay, let's move to the next one. Now, then it comes to 15th and early 16th century society and culture, regional culture specification, literary tradition, provincial architecture, society, culture, literature, and the arts of Vijayanagara Empire. I have already told you that this is like one part. Let's consider them as one unit, and let us believe that let's understand that the questions are increasing from this point, right? Now, moving to the most important chapter of Delhi, the most important chapter of of medieval India, that is Akbar. So ideally speaking, when it comes to Akbar, what do we believe? We believe that Akbar is the most important topic, and since there were several changes happening during the period of Akbar, such as we can say he is known for his political expansion, he is known for multiple administrative policies, such as we can talk about his Mansabdari system, his Dehsala system, so multiple things which are being asked from this side. So since there were so many things which were done by him, in fact most of them have been given here. So consolidate, conquest and consolidation, Jagir and Mansab system, Rajput policy, his religious policy, Sulh-e-Kul, court patronage of art and technology. So there are so many things, and in fact, like frankly speaking, if we talk about the medieval studies by the historians, like maximum studies has been done on this part. Either you say Irfan Habib or you say Muhammad Habib, you say Mujaffar Alam, Sanjay Subramaniam, right? Most of them have studied this topic extensively. There is no dearth of writing. There are multiple reasons because of what there is no dearth of writing. Because Abul Fazal and Badauni they do provide ample amount of information on Akbar, and that is how, including Nizamuddin Ahmed also, and that's how we are not lacking information. So studies bhi bahut hai, kaam bhi bahut hai. So ideally what happens, we should expect the question from this part. But then again, I'll say one thing, the number of questions had become less from this part, and now they are not paying this much attention. And if there are certain questions which are being asked, so the again the dimension of these questions have been asked. If you have that wisdom to understand, you'll be able to understand earlier, I can just give you one sentence, earlier the things, or earlier the questions were being asked on Akbar's policy with a positive perspective. Now the questions are being asked with a negative perspective, right? Last year you just remember the questions on the Ibadat Khana, and you'll find one thing, the question was basically asking you to write a very unique dimension of Akbar's Ibadat Khana. Let's see, I can, with the help of, that was the last topic what I had been discussing. Okay, Akbar. Now 2023 there was one question, 2022 one question, 19 there was one question, 21. I want to just show you the question that has been asked last year. Religious policy. I think this question is not there. This question was, let me read the question. I think I must be having this question. Okay. Sorry, I'm not having it. The question was like this: Ki Ibadat Khana did not gain any sort of respect for Akbar. Rather, it worked or it defamed Akbar. That was the question. Correct? So now you do not find so many questions coming from Akbar. Like, of course, you can expect one question, but then as I told you that the nature of these questions are also changing. This is the reason because of what Akbar, the way we had been paying attention to Akbar. Frankly speaking, we are not supposed to pay this much attention to Akbar anymore. तो आप think थोड़ा आप उसको जो है लिबरलाइज कर सकते हैं या थोड़ा उसको आप कैजुअली ले सकते हैं. Okay. Fine. Now, it is about the Mughal Empire in 17th century. Now, this is again the topic which is frankly speaking not very important for us. Okay? Major, there are so many things. Shahjahan is there, Jahangir, Shahjahan, Aurangzeb. And look at Aurangzeb, he has been just kept here. Though there are like great possibilities of the question from this part, yet there was he was just given as a minor topic. And then the empire and the Jamindar, the religious policies of Jahangir and in Jahangir, Shahjahan, and Aurangzeb, nature of the Mughal state, this is an important part. Late 17th century crisis and the revolts, that is a very important part, right? and the Ahom kingdom, right? Though normally so far there was very less number of questions have been asked on Ahom kingdom, but then I find this as very important, and this though undoubtedly is very important, which is Shivaji and the Shivaji and the early Maratha kingdom. So now if we'll see this topic, so mostly I can say the Mughals are becoming less, important, and instead of the Mughals, you can find that these kind of questions or these topics are becoming, or they are gaining gradually more importance. And that's why you should also focus less on Aurangzeb, Jahangir and Shahjahan. Normally, so I I advise to the students that Jahangir and Shahjahan are frankly not that important for you. And that's why if you wish to avoid them, like there is no problem. You can definitely avoid them. Aurangzeb, only with respect to certain policies of Aurangzeb, you should try to prepare. But then, as I told you, that the further policy, for further sort of things such as Ahom kingdom, Marathas, and then basically the late 17th century crisis. These are the more important topics, fine. And if you see the questions, you can find that the questions are coming from justice. Okay, that is the late 17th century. In 2021, there was one question. In 2000, there was a question on 2023. There was a question on Noor Jahan. Again, that's a very old topic. Like otherwise the questions you won't find from it. As I have already told you, Shivaji, 2020, 2019, the questions were there. Late 17th century. Jagirdari crisis, there was one question that was also on the crisis and the decline. I told you that the factors which were somehow contributing for the decline of the Mughal Empire, now they are important for you, so you should focus more on them, right? Moving to the next part, frankly speaking, this I find very, very, very important, right? That is the economy and society in 16th and 17th century. And the way I was highlighting you, the Sultanate economy and society, in the same way I would be highlighting the Mughal economy and society, whereas the equally it is important. The way that was, that topic was very important, or let's say those topics were very important. In the similar fashion, this topic is also very important. Now, within that, again, you can find multiple sort of multiple subtopics. So, population is one topic. Agrarian and the craft production, towns, commerce with Europe through Dutch, English, French companies. Then the trade revolution. What happened when they have been asking the question on the Portuguese? And you believe that why did they ask the question on Portuguese? This is the part of modern. But then they have given you in the syllabus not only the Portuguese, like Portuguese sounds bit okay, but then they have given Dutch, English, and French companies also. So with respect to Mughal state, if they have been asking a question on these European companies, it is not very surprising. And in fact, they have started asking these kind of questions, in the present times. And that's why you should be you should prepare these kind of things. Indian mercantile class, the banking, insurance, and the credit system. Now, if let's say they have asked the question on this part, he'll be saying why did they ask the question? And frankly speaking, now they have been increasing the questions on condition of peasants, the condition of women. Again, last year there was a question on this. Then evolution of the Sikh community and the Khalsa Panth. So look at the diversity of the topics. And if you see the questions specifically in last 2-3 years, look, frankly speaking, since very long I had been telling the students that if you really need to prepare for medieval part, in that case you have to change your older approach, because now they are becoming innovative. In ancient India, they had become quite innovative from much earlier times. But as far as this medieval period is concerned, now they are trying to become more and more innovative. And that's how they have started highlighting not only those topics, those topics which were so far remained very isolated. Apart from that, the new dimensions are also something which is being hunted a lot by them, right? So that's why I'll say that economy and society in 16th and 17th century, this is very important. And you should always try to prepare this topic, in fact, rather I'll say these topics pretty well. Let's see some of the examples also. This is a particular topic. Probably I have missed, I haven't included the questions, I did it, but probably due to some reason it could not be seen. There were questions even in last years also, last to last year, in last 4-5 years, they have asked so many questions from this particular topic. And that's why, you should focus more on this particular topic. Okay, let's move. That is the culture in the Mughal Empire. Now, if we'll talk about the culture in Mughal Empire, so undoubtedly the way I have been telling you that the way they have been increasing the number of questions on the Persian literature, then architecture, and some other dimensions. That is the from culture. So that's how this topic is also very important. Fine. So frankly speaking, now those peripheral topics have become so important in the current scenario, and they should be prepared pretty well by you. And then last topic is the 18th century. And again, the 18th century should not be understood only with respect to the decline of the Mughal. Earlier, when it comes to covering the medieval 18th century with a medieval perspective, we only talked about the decline of Mughal Empire. And frankly speaking, that was the only topic which was being prepared by the students. But then I believe that now the time has changed, right? So you can look at the questions. Sorry, other topics, regional participations, Nizam's Deccan, right? Bengal and Awadh. Last year there was a question on Nizam's Deccan. Maratha ascendancy under the Peshwas, very important topic, right? The Maratha fiscal and financial system. Now, frankly speaking, nobody pays attention to Maratha fiscal and financial system. But since the works have taken on them, they have been done on them, and that's why there are possibilities of the question. So far, they were not asking or they were not picking up these dimensions, because in medieval, most of the students are having this perception. It is the simplest part, and that's why those who do not want to study history a lot, they always used to prepare like medieval. They always try to attempt 3 questions from medieval. Why? Because they believe it is easy to answer 3 questions from medieval, and that's how they have been preparing those topics, right? But now, it is changing. I hope you remember the question. What were the political impacts of third battle of third battle of Panipat? Now these are the things which are always being ignored by the students. हम कभी बात ही नहीं करते उसके बारे में, यार यहाँ से इसने syllabus में दिया हुआ है तो यहाँ से question बन सकता है. So am I saying that what exactly I'm trying to say, that if you believe that the questions are going beyond the syllabus, definitely not, right? So let's try to figure it out, try to somehow note down that what are the core things that you should keep in mind while preparing this part, right? एक एक करके बात करते, that would be good for us. Fine. So, first thing, that when it comes to the medieval Indian syllabus, pay less attention to the previous popular topics. Got it? Akbar, it's very important, right? Then Alauddin Khilji, Balban, earlier they used to be very important. Now, frankly speaking, you are not supposed to pay this much attention to these topics. Rather, what is advisable, that those topics, the peripheral topics. Now, in peripheral topics, what exactly we are going to keep in mind? I think there are 3 things. One is society. One is economy, and one is culture. Now, when it comes to society, always divide the society in multiple parts. And frankly speaking, if you have followed this format, in that case, if you have followed this format, that would be quite helpful for you. What are they? When it comes to society, there was one division will be Hindu and Muslim society. There was another division is the urban and rural society, right? Then you can talk about peasant and traders. Then it may be after peasant and traders, traders and the artisans also, due to the space, I have been writing it less. Okay, then woman. Whenever you prepare, the society during medieval period specifically, break them into multiple categories, correct? And mind you, while reading any topic, if you are keeping this particular structure in your mind, in that case, you'll be able to somehow answer any question which has been coming from this part. Frankly speaking, any question from this part, right? So that is what you can do for the society. Now, when it comes to economy, now economy can be simply divided into 2 parts, okay? And what are these 2 parts? One is rural economy. But mind you, when I am writing the rural economy, That does not mean that you have to simply study about the agriculture. Basically, you have to study not only agriculture, but you have to also know about the agrarian relation. And what is agrarian relation? In a rural society, there are multiple classes. So since there are multiple classes, so you need to prepare even certain content on those classes. Let me tell you more categorically. Let's say when you talk about the rural class. So there are different kind of peasantry. If you have studied medieval, in that case, you must be knowing about Khud caste, Pai caste, and so on, Mujrayan and so on, right? On the other hand, there are certain intermediary class, then money lending class, right? So basically, questions may be asked on them also, and that's why while covering the economy, you should focus more on them, right? And then it comes to the urban economy. When it comes to the urban economy, there you should again talk about the various classes, okay? The various classes, and then trade. When you talk about the trade, always prepare the topic trade with respect to internal trade as well as external trade, right? And if it is possible, you divide the India also in two parts, South India and North India. And if it you are dividing India into three parts, North India, Deccan, and South India, that would be good for you. So you can prepare the economy under these subheadings, right? And then it comes to culture. I think it's not very important, it's not very complicated. So in culture, you know about architecture. In culture, literature is very important. In culture, painting is very important. One topic that has become very prominent these days is about literature. And in fact, culture is also one highly burning topic these days. And there is a reason behind it, because in culture now there are so many questions are being asked, because there are so many new writers are coming, such as in the early medieval and ancient Parun Pandya, there is that Ebba Koch, she has become very popular recently. Those like the lady who is working on the Mughal architecture. So in the recent times, some good number of write-ups have appeared on the cultural part, and specifically literature, and then Selden Pollock is also there, right? So ये कुछ ऐसे scholars हैं जो recent times में जिसका काम काफी अच्छा रहा है, जिसकी वजह से culture part important है. So when it comes to the peripheral topics, frankly speaking, these are the peripheral topics that you need to prepare. Okay. There is another thing in the peripheral topics. Again, you should be quite careful here. In the peripheral topic, you should focus even on the regional history. What happened? That is considered to be one of the biggest lacuna of the medieval Indian history. That has been challenged recently. Is that in medieval Indian history, the maximum focus has been given to whom? Maximum focus had been given to basically Delhi Sultanate and Mughal. And frankly speaking, let's say if you talk about the book of Satish Chandra, in that case there are two volumes. One volume is primarily dealing with Delhi Sultanate. Vijayanagara is included as just one chapter. And on the other hand, if you read the second volume, so the Mughals are in the center of that book. So what about the other regional powers, such as Kashmir is there, Malwa is there, the Sarkis are there. There are so many kingdoms are there. But unfortunately, Rajput kingdoms are there. They have been ignored. So now, when I'm saying the peripheral topics, I also mean that you should focus a lot on the regional histories, and they are there between Sultanate and Mughal. They are there before the Sultanate. They are there between even after the Mughals. So in every three distinct phases, you can find that the regional history is there. The way I was telling you that Marathas have become very important, Sikhs have become very important. They have been asking the questions on the Asaf Jahi dynasty, the Nizam Shahi dynasty of Asaf Jah, that is in Hyderabad. So people could not have ever imagined that UPSC is going to ask question on them. So that's how the and in fact one more thing you should not take it in other ways. I'm telling you that at any point of time, you can't say that they are not asking from asking the questions beyond the syllabus. Rather, they have given so many things in your syllabus. It is your problem that you are not reading about it. But then if you minutely pay attention to the syllabus and you try to somehow understand it with respect to the kind of narrative or the discourse going on in history writing in the present times, you'll be able to understand why they have been emphasizing on those topics and how come they have become more significant. Frankly speaking, there's nothing as such very new. There is nothing as such which makes it very surprising. ये बहुत कॉमन सी बात है कि देयर इज अ डिस्कोर्स व्हिच इज गोइंग ऑन इन दिस कंट्री, करेक्ट, with respect to history writing. I'm telling you that earlier, like there was greater emphasis had been given to Sultanate and Mughal. Now the simple question has been asked, like asked that why not to study Malwa, why not to study Gujarat, why not to study like Vijayanagara in the Sikh kingdom, and of course there should be a history of them also, a home kingdom. That's very important. Yet a home kingdom has not been hunted properly by UPSC, but I can like I can like give you that guarantee that in coming future, like you can find so many questions like from this home kingdom also, and there are multiple reasons, like I cannot like tell about every reason here, but then I am telling you that over the period you can find more number of questions from the home kingdom. That is the reality I've been telling you. So when it comes to like the next part, so you have to keep in mind that the peripheral topics are very important, fine. Now the third suggestion, right, coming to the third suggestion, I have to write here only. Okay, third suggestion, that when you prepare the medieval India, now don't try to get deeper. Okay? Don't go deeper. Deeper. Rather, just collect info in, let's say, maximum 1,000 words. Fine. आपको क्या करना है? Like as I told you that there are so many diverse topics. What is best for you? Just decode it into multiple like smaller topics or the smaller dimensions. आप उसको तोड़ दीजिए, जितना भी डिकोड लाइक तोड़ सकते हैं, यू जस्ट ब्रेक इट, एंड देन ऑन एवरी like सब टॉपिक at least you should have the 1,000 words. Fine. So if you have done it, frankly speaking, you won't face so much difficulty in whatsoever question is coming. Right. That is also one suggestion. Okay. Next thing, the traditional topics. The traditional topics should be also prepared in a different way. So I'm not at any point of time, I'm not saying that the questions are not coming from the traditional topics. They are also being included, right? But what did I tell you? That the new dimensions are being asked. Like, new dimensions are being hunted. So when it comes to the traditional topics, you should learn that how to how to cope up with these dimensions, and that's why while preparing that particular part, you should focus a lot on the new dimensions also, and specifically like apart from new dimension, if we'll try to understand the things, let's say the things basically concepts wise, that also may work. That's also like one thing that you have to keep in mind. One more thing, one more suggestion for the traditional topics. In medieval India, there are two things which are very precisely missing. One is historiography, and the second is the sources. Normally, you read the medieval India from Satish Chandra. Since Satish Chandra does not provide you the historiography, and that's why your historiography is almost all missing. So if you have been really following this trend of like missing historiography, in that case, I'm not saying it is compulsory. But what am I saying? What am I saying? That if you are not mentioning it, or just by mentioning the historiography, you can make your answers a bit different. So there are very less number of historians, those who have been dealing with most of the parts of medieval Indian history. If you just remember the name of those scholars, specifically some newer one, in that case, I think it is easier for you to mention those scholars. That's point number one. The second thing is about the primary sources. I told you that in paper one, in history itself, like sources are very important. But then in paper one, there is greater significance of the sources, but nobody ever mentions like the sources in your sources in your answer. So if you develop this habit of mentioning the sources like in your answer, again you can take an advantage, a lead as compared to like your competitors. So this is another thing that you have to keep in mind, that like in the traditional topics, try to understand it more conceptually, the new dimensions, and then add certain historiography and sources in it, and that's how you can give a sort of boost or a sort of like edge to your answers. That's how you can perform better. But the most important suggestion is like this one, and whatever I told you in the previous slide, that you have to learn that what are the decoded topics. Clear idea has been given to you by the clear idea has been given to you by the syllabus itself. You never see the syllabus. That's the problem. So you see the syllabus will be able to, if I'm telling you that the peripheral topics are becoming important, fair enough. What peripheral topics? That is given in the syllabus. So you don't need to somehow read a lot in order to decode the syllabus. Frankly speaking, it is not needed. It is already there. You need to collect the information, but then do collect the information on them because yes, now it has become important. Now, moving to the last part of this particular lecture, and that is about basically, right, that what are the sources that you should refer for medieval India? That is the most important question that you all guys must be having. Sources. Look, most of the people read Satish Chandra. Whether you accept it or don't accept, this is the reality. That becomes the base book. And in fact, I'll say several people use Satish Chandra. There are 2 volume books. कुछ लोग तो इतने कंजूस है कहते हैं कि जो वो एनसीईआरटी वाली बुक है वो पढ़ने से काम नहीं चलेगा क्या? नहीं चलेगा. Look, Satish Chandra, as per the recent pattern of UPSC, does not cater all of your requirements. That's why don't read Satish Chandra. You can read the 1 volume of Satish Chandra, matlab that single volume of Satish Chandra, which is getting you a very good insight on medieval India. If you do not have any idea of medieval India, अगर आपको समझ है ठीक है, नहीं समझ है उस केस में you can read it, right? And as I told you that there's another problem in Satish Chandra. It is emphasizing a lot on the political history. So the crux of the whole lecture, today's lecture, was this only, that unfortunately the political history does not remain the mainstay or the core of the UPSC question in the present time, and that's why you should not focus a lot on the those eras. Rather, what you're supposed to do, you should focus on the non-political affairs, right, and the peripheral topics. So Satish Chandra somehow does not cater this requirement. In that case, from where? So frankly speaking, there is no one book. There is no one book which includes everything what you want. ये सोसाइटी पे भी वैसे इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोवाइड कर रहा है, कल्चर पे भी वैसे इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोवाइड कर रहा है. I think it is impossible to say. It is impossible to say that it is providing one book has been providing information on all these topics. In fact, I cannot bet on this. There is no notes in the market also which is providing information on every topic and the necessary information and that's how I should I will suggest you that make any one book as the base book, as base book, and then as per the topics you just go for a couple of articles. If you'll try to search articles, and mind you, academic articles, right, not the Google notes. If you have been reading the Google notes, you are in Google there are double O, right? It is an indication. Okay? Not chat GPT also. Okay? Naam iska chat GPT hai. Basically articles, any article, pick up any article, academic article, and finish that particular topic from that. I think if you have been doing it that way, that would be the best way to get the solution of the medieval India. So don't rely on one source. एक किसी भी किताब को you can make the base book. Either it is Jail Mehta or Satish Chandra or it is any other author. It may be the base book, but then definitely not the sole solution of anything. And you have to collect the information from the other sources, right? So that's all about the medieval India. I believe that this lecture was giving you at least some doing some valuable addition in your information. And these are just merely suggestions. So I hope you'll follow it and you'll get the positive result. Thank you very much. Thank you.